That's all I know about that. So let's talk about our guests for this evening. These guests that we have are a couple of folks we've seen in the preparedness community. They're all over the place. They've been to expos. They are the quintessential professionals in the medical industries for preparedness. Tonight we have Dr. Alton and Nurse Amy, the acclaimed authors behind several highly praised survival and medical guidebooks. Their works include 3-time Book of Excellence Award winner and Amazon bestseller, The Survival Medicine Handbook. They're also recognized for their 2020 Book of Excellence Award winner, Alton's Antibiotics and Infectious Diseases. Additionally, they've penned a lot of award-winning, right? And a lot of bestsellers here. You get the theme. Bestseller, Alton's Pandemic Preparedness Guide, the 2014 New York Times bestseller, the Ebola Survival Handbook, and the Zika virus handbook, amongst a whole bunch of other influential type of things. So without any further ado, Dr. Bones and Nurse Amy, welcome to the Eden Army Pod Show, guys. We love having you here.
Hey, Pete. Thank
Pete.
you.
We're glad to be here. Thanks for having us.
Oh, my pleasure. My pleasure. Now I've gone to a few expos. This is really, I retired in February, so we've kind of been at the same expos, but I'm kind of weird. I never leave my table. I just feel like if someone's coming to buy a book from me, I want to shake their hand and look them in the eye and talk to them, right? So I never get to experience what you guys are teaching, but everybody that comes back, they're like, oh, I just took a suture class here. I just did this there. And I'm like, oh my goodness. So I gotta meet these guys. So when I had the opportunity, I was like, heck yeah, put them on, and I will flounder through it and we'll make it work. So I do have a question for you. As a retired fire medic, you both had great careers. Dr. Alton, you were an MD. Amy, you were a nurse practitioner and a certified midwife, from what I understand. What in the world made you guys want to leave your 9-to-5 and get into this preparedness realm where definitive care is probably not even going to exist?
Well, let me start. I was exposed to disaster medicines very early in my career as a volunteer DMAT member in the aftermath of Hurricane Andrew down here in South Florida. That was back in like 1992. Yeah. And since that time, you and I and everybody has seen so many natural disasters. We've seen epidemics, we've seen pandemics, we've seen shootings, civil unrest. And for the first time, we're now seeing armed conflicts that could actually lead to a world war. And so I have to say that very early on, we, like many Floridians, became what you might call a hurricane prepper. And that means instead of the 3 days worth of food and supplies that people have, the average American, we'd have a couple of weeks worth. But I really have to say, for me, it was Hurricane Katrina in 2005 that really opened my eyes, because it was then that I saw what really happens when the ambulance isn't just right around the corner. I mean, not that we didn't have hundreds of medical personnel converging on the Gulf Coast during that time. That was going on even before the storm was over. But the providers and the technologies couldn't get to the people that needed them due to flooding. But any kind of disaster, any number of disasters can actually do that. I mean, an earthquake could make roads impassable, for example. Any disaster with enough casualties can overwhelm that existing infrastructure. I mean, if there's a 3-car wreck in a 2-ambulance town, you could have a very bad outcome. So we figured if we could teach the average person how to deal with injuries and illness, put some supplies in their hands, well, some tragic outcomes might actually be avoided. So our mission became to put a medically prepared person in every family before a disaster occurred.
Excellent. And what people from other parts of the country don't really understand about Floridians, we're preparedness freaks by nature. We get hit by hurricanes all the time. So it's not uncommon for me to be without electricity for 2 to 3 weeks, right, during a big storm. So I don't want my wife and my kid to try to go to the store and do all that stuff. Let's have our stuff here at the house. That way we're ready. So Floridians by nature are preparedness folks. Going that extra step to long-term preparedness is where you guys are really taking it, especially on the medical aspect. So that's what I really appreciate about your scribbles that you guys are putting out. It's really good. And the other thing I like about your one book, which we'll talk about here in a little bit, I love the fact that you two promote herbal medicines, natural medicines, right? And I have a question. If a person had the option of growing only a few medicinal plants, what would be your top 4 or 5 and why? What, if they only had a small garden, what would be your top 4 or 5? That's it, if they could only grow those.
Let me start by saying that we're master gardeners through the state of Florida Agricultural Extension Office. So one thing we really are into is plants and gardens and things like that. So you have to remember, right plant, right place. We live in a subtropical zone, zone 10 here. So we have the disadvantage of not being able to grow a number of plants that you might be able to grow up in Wisconsin, for example, let's say like apple trees. But we do have the advantage of having multiple growing seasons. So any recommendation about what we would grow personally might make only sense for people living where we do. Having said that, we do have our favorite medicinal plants. And Amy, what do you think?
So I tried to pick something that, probably can grow everywhere. Rosemary, love rosemary. As an oil, it relieves muscle aches. It can relieve headaches. It also decreases stress. Lavender, everyone knows lavender tea helps to relax you. And the reason it sounds like I have a little theme here about relaxation is because for me, the feeling of not having electricity and water running through my faucets and access to food or being able to go to the grocery store, et cetera, is a very stressful thought. And so some of these things tend to be towards calming. So the theme, rosemary, lavender, peppermint is really great for digestive issues. When people get upset, their stomach gets upset, nausea, upset stomach. Peppermint is also great for headaches, which is another thing that happens when somebody is stressed. Elderberries are wonderful. Elder flowers. I'm not sure if everyone's heard of elderberry liquid elixir. They also make syrups. It's great. It's an antiviral. And of course, we can't treat viral infections with antibiotics, which hopefully everyone has stored. And I think we're going to talk about that later. But you need to have something that's natural that might help you heal and get rid of some of these viruses in a faster way. And so having an elder tree would be great. And then I know that I'm supposed to pick one more, but it was hard for me to be torn between ginger, which I love for digestion, for upset stomach. Again, when you're not feeling well, you're stressed out, you have an upset stomach, and ginseng, which is a really great antiviral and also decreases stress. So I know I did 6, but I think ginger and ginseng are both great. And
well, I'm going to add 7 also, and another G. That's garlic.
Garlic. I mean, I could go on and on. Really,
well-known antibiotic properties. Really, really an excellent thing to grow if you can. Here we have some trouble growing it down here. I think it might be a little too hot for
grow garlic.
I have
tried
garlic varieties,
but we do have a nice list in the book, the Survival Medicine Handbook. And so what we've tried to do in here is not only tell you about teas, tell you which ones make great oils, tell you how to grow a medicinal garden, tell you with each specific herb to grow, what the environment might be best for that. It's not the end-all herbal book. And I think later on we're going to talk about some other books, and I have a couple herbal books. But we combine traditional medicine with herbal medicine because we want people to acknowledge that nature is a wonderful medicine cabinet. Just because you don't buy it in a pharmacy or you don't buy it in the grocery store pharmaceutical aisle doesn't mean it might not help you. Is it going to be 100% effective as amoxicillin? Probably not. It depends on what you're treating. Let's take, for instance, a wound infection with staph, something that's resistant to penicillin. You can use raw honey on that wound, external wound, and have more of an effect with MRSA, the methicillin-resistant staph, than you would with oral antibiotics. So sometimes nature's a little better.
Mm-hmm.
Sometimes it's not as good, and it just depends on what you're treating.
And it varies with
Absolutely.
the individuals too.
Yeah.
And I appreciate, Doc, that you added, as an Italian, I appreciate you added garlic to the mix because that'll make my wife happy anyway. I certainly do appreciate that.
Garlic, a clove a day. I don't know. We're going to keep vampires away and probably viruses.
And probably my wife away if I eat a clove. So we'll see. So
you put them in capsules though. So
okay. I'm just gonna chew it. You know, we've been married 20 plus years. She doesn't want anything to do with me anyway, so that works fine. But let's go ahead and shift gears away from herbal remedies and talk about some traditional medicines.
Yeah.
And now you're well aware, Doc and Nurse Amy, the prepping community has for quite a while been promoting the idea that people should stock animal antibiotics for personal use. Now, look, we know the FDA has issued a formal letter about this. Can you kind of explain what their formal ruling was and what your thoughts are about using this type of antibiotics?
Yeah, let's talk about that. Thousands of preppers have relied on fish antibiotics for their medical storage and for actually many years. But these antibiotics and antifungals have been a sore subject for me, especially just in the recent past. In 2010, I was actually the first physician to suggest that in long-term off-grid scenarios, the veterinary equivalents exist that were available without a prescription and were identical to human antibiotics. These were in the form of fish and bird antibiotics. And you can still find my original article on it in James Wesley Rawls' survival blog. Now, how did we know this? Well, we're both medical professionals. I guess you can also call us aquaculturists. That is that we raise fish everywhere from everything from guppies to tilapia in ponds, along with aquatic plants and other things. And whenever our human patients got a bacterial infection, I would give them, let's say amoxicillin as an antibiotic. And if our fish developed a bacterial infection like fin rot, well, we'd give them a product called Fishmox. That's right here, as you can see.
Yep.
Now, when we became interested in medical preparedness, we realized that a lot of people wouldn't have access to antibiotics and might die of simple infections that could travel to the bloodstream and cause a fatal, what we call sepsis. Now, maybe you saw the History Channel program After Armageddon. Have you heard of that?
I have, certainly. Absolutely.
In After Armageddon, a family headed by a paramedic navigates a post-apocalyptic landscape, eventually ending up with in a survival community. But everybody has to do their share, so the paramedic winds up working in the garden, something that he knows very little about, cuts himself with a tool. The wound becomes infected. It spreads. Now he goes to the community medic, but guess what? There are no antibiotics in the storage. So over the next few weeks, this trained professional watches himself get sicker and eventually dies.
Yep.
And that was an unnecessary death that could have been dealt with if there were antibiotics. So we looked at aquatic antibiotics as a possible option. And indeed, when we looked at them, they only had one ingredient, the antibiotic itself. There's only, in this bottle here, there's only amoxicillin 500 milligrams. And that's the other thing. 500 milligrams, they're only produced in human dosages. Why would my guppy need the same dose of antibiotics as a 100 adult human? And then we did the acid test. We compared the actual capsules.
That one's sealed.
Oh, this one's sealed.
I did that.
The human, I can tell you that the human version made by Deva Pharmaceuticals was a red and pink capsule with the numbers and letters WC731 on it. The fish antibiotic, Fishmox, this one here, was a red and pink capsule with the numbers and letters WC731 on it. Mm-hmm. We found 12 antibiotics, different antibiotics of all different varieties that were just that way. They met all of those criteria. Same as human, only producing human dosages, only have one ingredient, and look identical down to the numbers and letters on the capsules.
And truth be known, probably coming from the same assembly line.
And I verified that with some further research. So and they were just rebottled for the aquarium trade. Now, as such, we recommended that the preparedness community store these in quantity. Well, on December 14th, as you just mentioned, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration announced the issuance of warning letters to major manufacturers and distributors like Chewy.com, Aquanest, Valleyvet, and others that forbade the sale of unapproved antimicrobial animal drugs as a violation of federal law. Now, the agency claimed these medicines used for fish and birds were never registered for approval as veterinary medicines. That meant that the FDA considered them to be new animal drugs despite their being around for more than 30 years. And the agency says that using them outside of the direct supervision of a doctor or veterinarian contributes to the development of antibiotic resistance. Now, I can't deny that statement is true. Injudicious use of antibiotics can lead to just that. They're not candy.
Except that it's mostly the animals that are getting the antibiotics that are causing the infections, not humans.
Yes, that's right. As a matter of fact, antibiotics, the overuse of antibiotics is occurring 79% in food-producing livestock, not being given to other humans.
Not us, right.
Wow. So with that ruling coming out from the FDA, one of my fears is that now the preparedness community will go to outside resources to get these antibiotics. They'll go from Mexico or from wherever they happen to be. And you don't exactly know what's in that because, of course, they're not regulated at the same fashion that we regulate it here at the United States. Is that something you guys have considered or thought about?
So most of our medicines in the United States, I know this is maybe not news that a lot of people want to hear, but most of our medicines are made in China. Mm-hmm. That's just where almost everything that you take, I take, he takes, 80-90% of the people who are taking medicines, that's just where they're made. So we rely on China, who we really don't trust, to make our precious medicine to keep us alive and keep our blood pressure down and our cholesterol down and our sugar down and our hearts beating normal and all the other things that we take medicines for, mental illnesses, physical, you name it. Most likely, no matter who it says it's bottled for on the label, it is sourced in China.
Right.
So Pfizer might make a medicine and they say, produced for Pfizer. Well, where was it produced?
Right.
The originator was probably China. It's either ingredients from there, just the powders that are turned into capsules here, or the tablets are all made there and then transferred over here. That's just where we're getting them. So, yeah, they're coming from kind of untrustworthy areas. So, yes, you can go to India and you can travel down to Mexico, and probably those medicines all came from China anyway, because that's who's doing our drugs for the world.
And you can find human companies online in the United States that will also offer you packages of antibiotics, but they'll only give you one course.
Right.
They'll only allow you to order once a year. And that's the problem for the medic of a survival group, because you may be dealing with 20 people, 30 people. And, a course of antibiotics is not going to last very long. I mean, in the past, when fish antibiotics were available, you could buy 500.
This is a bottle of 100.
That's 100.
Wow.
This is 100. One bottle.
I could buy 500 of them. I could buy 1,000 of them.
Yeah, we had one of our containers. I don't know where it is. It has 500.
So
was it 500 amoxicillin?
Yes. With the new FDA warning, this is no longer an option. What it has done is robbed the survival medic of an important tool in the medical woodshed. And I firmly believe that when the antibiotics run out in a long-term disaster, there's going to be many unnecessary deaths due to minor infections that get out of hand, enter the bloodstream, and cause a life-threatening situation.
Which is a problem. I mean, if I just want to say something, if you live in Mexico, you can literally buy these things over the counter. There's a lot of countries in this world that just let you buy these things over the counter. Like if you need it, you go to the pharmacist, you say, I've got X issue. The pharmacist says, here's a bottle of so-and-so, and you walk out. That happened to us in Spain. I was traveling over there. I got a horrible respiratory infection 9 years ago. Just literally the night before we were getting on a plane, and the pharmacist just gave Joe what he needed, and he brought it home to me, and I started taking it. He didn't tell me to go to a doctor, get a written prescription, and bring it in. He just handed Joe what he needed. So it's kind of sad. We have way too much control over the distribution of medicines. And I think the American people are very smart, and I think we should let them control more of these prescriptions.
I agree. And, it's funny, a couple points there. My daughter last year was on a mission trip to Egypt, and HIPAA violations. She's prone to UTIs being a young lady. And she ended up getting a pretty severe one in Egypt. And one of the clinics there gave her a pill, have no idea what it was. And she took it, knocked it out. So she may have gotten a few extra ones and brought them home. And sure enough, she's become resistant to some of the antibiotics because she's been getting these things for a long time. And whatever is in that thing that they gave her in Egypt, I'm telling you, knocked it out like it was nothing. One point I want to make, Doc, and one reason I really like your book. People think being a medic is a sexy kind of thing because we go to field training exercises and we train TCCC, trauma casualty care, and they think we're going to go ahead and plug wounds and put tourniquets on and crike somebody, needle decompress, and all this stuff, which is it's really sexy stuff. It's cool, right?
Yeah.
But the real fact of the matter is, as my group's medic, I'm probably going to be treating things like trench foot and how to relieve a guy's hemorrhoids, honestly. So, it's not always a glamorous thing. But what I like about your books is it shows the layperson some options they could use to become, if not the lead medic in their group, but someone that could lend a helping hand, certainly, because they have that much knowledge that's in your all's books. So I certainly do appreciate that.
It's not all gunfights at the OK Corral. Right. At least I certainly hope not. You're going to be treating athlete's foot as much as you're going to be treating an amputation
and diarrhea.
Probably a lot more.
And diarrhea, absolutely. And I caught our good friend Angry Americans podcast with you guys on, and you talked about some rehydration methods that you could use if you're not capable of doing an IV. So maybe guys will talk about that particular rehydration method on the after show, because it is, and it works. It works. It's not just voodoo and smoke and mirrors. It actually works. So it's good stuff.
And it's much safer than sticking a needle in somebody with a tubing of some solution that you homemade.
Right. A little less, maybe a little more uncomfortable, but I get it. The end result is it's much better, probably. Yeah. So talking about the FDA and talking about the government, I'm going to say government oversight and government intruding on people. I'd like to ask you a question. If you don't want to answer this, that's fine, because as well as I do, Dr. Anthony Fauci has been in front of congressional hearings here last week. Do you think that the government's response to the COVID pandemic could have potentially hurt further responses to even a deadlier outbreak? I mean, as far as public trust factor in the CDC and the federal government. See, my fear is something really is going to come down the line. And because of what kind of fiasco we had with how we handled the COVID epidemic, I feel like there's a lot of people that aren't going to heed the real warnings. What are your thoughts on that?
Pete, this is a subject that's very relevant to us. Amy had a very severe response to the Johnson & Johnson vaccine that was later taken off the market. Tell them what happened to you.
Oh, my God. So, being a medical professional and being able to get the vaccine super early, plus I knew someone who was in the Moderna study. She told me, she wasn't supposed to tell me, but she knew I was also a nurse practitioner, that she was in the study and that she had known all the other people and no one was having any issues. So when it came down to it, and my husband is much older than most people who are probably listening to this, and has
I'm 70.
All the comorbidities that they say, this, and this is going to increase your risk of death. And I'm like, well, I love my husband and I want him to live to be 100 plus, and I will do anything to help him. So I felt it was necessary for me to get a vaccine, and I kind of researched. I didn't want to get the Moderna. I didn't want to get the Pfizer. I didn't like how they were producing them. I didn't feel that those were safe, but the Johnson & Johnson was different. And I thought, well, this is a one dose and it's made differently. And I don't think it's going to cause the same possible changes with DNA that these other ones are like just too scary, freaky to me. So I did what I thought was safest for me and safest for him. And everyone else that I know had the other ones were fine. But I had the Johnson & Johnson. In 9 days, I was near death. I know now what I was having. I didn't know then because at the time there were no side effects for vaccines. So I started having excruciating head pain, which I now know was encephalitis. And I was probably having micro blood clots. I do feel like I have a little brain damage. It sounds terrible, but I can't remember things. I do something and I immediately forget that I've done it. So I have really bad short-term memory. I have better long-term memory, but I literally will take a medicine, a Tylenol, and say, oh, did I just take a Tylenol, or where's my coffee cup? Whatever. Shortness of breath. My heart rate resting was about 110. At not moving in bed, my oxygen saturation was low. It was running like 92, 93, not enough to go to the hospital, but low enough where I bought an oxygen generator and I would put oxygen on. Yep. Extreme body pain from head to toe, every joint, every muscle. I had ear pain that was excruciating and vertigo. So if I would sit up too quickly, the room would continue to spin. I could barely walk to the bathroom. Sometimes I would get to the bathroom. I would have to lay on the floor. And then after a while, be able to get back up and get back to the bed. 6 weeks. I went to the ER 3 times, to the front door. I said, can you let my husband in? They said, no, it's COVID. We're not letting anybody in. Right. I said, well, I'm having a terrible vaccine side effect. And they said, vaccines don't cause side effects. And they laughed at me. They physically, I said, I want to speak to the nurse manager. They would bring her out, the same person, 3 times. And she would physically laugh in my face that I couldn't be telling the truth, that this is not happening to me and something else was going on. And they would have to do a slew of tests to figure out what else it was. And so I just said to her peacefully, I said, well, then I will just go home and die because I'm not going in there without my husband. I'm just not. And I finally decided to take a steroid. I took a Medrol dose pack. Out of 6 weeks, I just said, I don't know what else to do. I'm losing feeling in my legs, feeling in my arms, and I'll take a Medrol dose pack. I did 3 doses a first day and then 3 doses second day. I finished it after 21 days, and I managed to get rid of most things.
So we haven't taken any further vaccinations.
I don't recommend vaccines to anyone. They don't work.
That's a minority view among medical professionals who take
absolutely. And we're going to talk about how you guys are viewed in the medical field, if you are, if that's had any repercussions here after the break. But it's funny because I was still in the field when COVID was going on and when they were rolling all these vaccines out, and I would take it upon myself to ask the patient that was having a cardiac issue that I felt might be having a pulmonary emboli, right? And I'd say, have you been vaccinated? And 9 out of 99% of them said, absolutely. And they tell me, and I'd go, you never had a heart condition before in your life? Nope. And if now they're having heart conditions, they're having arrhythmias, they're having shortness of breath without the presence of COVID. And due to blood clots, pulmonary emboli, and stuff like that. So, look, I go ahead, Bub.
It was horrifying.
These vaccines were given to they were not properly tested for adverse reactions. They were given to people who were at minimal risk, like small children, And they basically forced the dogma upon our citizens that only Dr. Fauci's answers were the science. You know, I belong to the Frontline COVID Critical Care Alliance, and I believe strongly in ivermectin and hydroxychloroquine. That could have been used to fight the epidemic, but instead it was vilified simply because the president at the time supported their use. And I've taken ivermectin myself as recently as a week or so
We've
ago.
never gotten COVID. And I don't, I am not saying that the vaccine prevent us from getting COVID, because we know those things wear off after a couple months. I believe the ivermectin, whenever we knew that we were going to be in a group that was close contact, a lot of people, maybe, you know, of course, indoors, I do not also believe that you can transmit it outside. So all these people who are wearing masks, walking in their cars by themselves, ridiculous, absolutely ridiculous. You cannot transmit COVID outside. It floats away. There's not enough of a viral load that's going to float into you. I mean, unless you're like, you know, practically making out with that person and they're breathing in your face for a long time. If you're in a normal talking distance, you know, with another human being, you are not going to get COVID from them. I don't care how deep into their infection they have it. People who wear masks outside, it's not necessary, and it's just plain stupid.
I just want to say something. One last thing.
Yes, sir. No.
I hope that we're not running too over long here.
No, sir. This is your night. You guys have at it. This is great information.
Well,
I'm ranting.
I just want to say, you know, that these N95 masks that have gotten such a terrible name for, you know, not stopping the COVID virus. Few people really don't know why they didn't work, but we knew that they wouldn't work from the very beginning. The N95 mask stops 95% of droplets that are 1.3 microns or larger. The problem is the COVID virus is smaller than 1.3 microns.
Right.
And it can pass through the mask. So we shouldn't have expected it to work, and the public should have been notified much earlier.
And kids didn't need to stay home from school because kids get over it like no big deal.
No, and so
in school.
No, and as a parent, you know, my daughter was 18, 17 at the time. I struggled with, should I vaccinate her? Because God forbid something were to happen and find out that the vaccine could have saved her life, right? These are things that go through a father's mind, right? With a young, but thank the Lord, she got COVID. She got it. And I said, now she has a natural immunity, which Fauci said wasn't as effective as the vaccine, which was BS, because I've seen news reports from him 7 or 8 years ago saying, no, natural immunity is the best thing in the world. So I knew it was BS. Okay, so when she got it, of course, I got it. And I thank the Lord for that, because I knew that I never had to struggle with the thought, okay, should I get her vaccinated? So absolutely. I agree with you guys 100% on that.
And these children should never have been vaccinated, and they shouldn't be vaccinated now. No, in fact, I literally firmly believe that nobody in the world should get a COVID vaccine.
No.
They don't work. They wear off too quickly. They're pretty much ineffective. So they need to just throw them all in the trash and try to sell us something else.
And you know, Amy, the symptoms you had from the vaccine itself was the high grade COVID symptoms, muscle aches, blurred vision, vertigo, stuff like that.
Shortness of breath, high heart rate, low oxygen.
Yes. When I got COVID, my resting heart rate stayed at 120 for 7 days.
Yep.
Stayed. Yep. Yeah. So they put me back to work, and immediately I got, did a 12 lead, got on the monitor and saw that my heart rate was racing along at 120, and they're like, you got to get out of here. I go, yeah, that's what I'm trying to tell you. Let me get done with this damn virus I got in me, and I'll come back to work. After that, I'll be fine. So I'm not saying that COVID wasn't a well-engineered virus. It certainly was. Okay. Yes, exactly. It did its job, and it was deadly to some people. But if you had the ability to get the natural immunity, for the love of God, make it happen. Make it happen. I'm not saying, kiss somebody that has COVID, but, and, recently I just saw on the news today, guys, just because Jeff over on Kick mentioned myocarditis.
Yep.
Kansas City Chief player, another football player, young man, went into cardiac arrest during a meeting. It wasn't even on the field. It was after a workout. And if you remember, the Buffalo Bills, Damar Hamlin, fell out completely on the field, went into cardiac arrest, and had to be resuscitated in front of millions of people. And he has a gag order on him saying that he can't blame that on the virus. Now, I don't know that for 100%, but when he was asked flat out about it, he says, I'm not allowed to answer that question.
Wow.
So these are young men. These are athletic men. Okay. And now we see what's going on. Now, that's not popular for mainstream media and stuff like that. But you know what? I don't really care, because if Facebook and YouTube kicks me off, then we'll just stay with the cool kids over there on Kick. So I'm good with that.
The truth is the truth.
It is. And the funny thing is, the truth today were the conspiracy theorists back when all this stuff was going on. These people are now saying, oh, yeah, you were right about this, you were that. But it's amazing to me. But thank God, my wife's also a nurse. She was in medical sales for a long time. Thank God she had the right mindset to understand what in the world was going on. So interesting. Guys, I do have to pay some bills. I apologize. I hope you stick around. We do have to run a quick commercial, and then we'll come back to you after the break, if you don't mind.
Nope,
Absolutely.
we're good.
Run it, Russ. Outstanding. Good job, Russ. I appreciate that. Right, Jeff, you are correct. Russ is on top of things. Guys, that is the Troy's Gate experience that I went through. It's been critiqued, as you know, from past podcasts from the IDF guys, Emery, and unbeknownst to me, T put it on in front of Joe Tedeye, who, as we know, is a ground branch guy. So, yeah, I was a little embarrassed by some of that, but I think I got the job done. And that's only because we went through the proper training, and the Troy's Gate experience is one of those spots where you can get that training. So remember, right after Mountain Readiness Fallout event in October, we're going to do a 1-day class, basic pistol class with myself. And then the next day, we are 100% going to go into that Troy's Gate experience. And if you own a firearm and you have the ability to go to this thing, you really should. So even if you can't take my class the day before, you can't afford it, listen, get the down payment in, and then at least get to that Troy's Gate experience on the second day. It is a game changer, and it'll tell you everything you need to know about your abilities, what you're good at, and what you lack, and it'll help you in your training aspect of preparedness. So good to go. Sorry, guys. I know that was a little long-winded, but welcome back.
Well, thank you.
So Doc and Nurse Amy, we're currently doing a series on the podcast about our recommended mandatory minimums. Those are the mandatory minimums I expect everybody to have in my group, whether it be medical. We did an IFAC. You can add a couple other things, but these are my mandatory minimums, the things you have to have. So the last series we did was on and the one we're in right now is on our bug out bags. So keeping with that theme, what are your 3 mandatory medical items everyone should have in their bug out bag?
Wow. It's really rough, honestly.
I know. I know.
You have to understand, I have hundreds of medical items because I make first aid kits. So I'm going to have to say antiseptics. because we want to prevent infections so you don't have to use those antibiotics that we can't get anymore and that you might have in short supply. So you need to be able to clean your wounds very well, because prevention, an ounce of prevention is worth a
pound of cure.
It is.
Just my sentences.
I'm going to finish. I want to finish this sentence too. And some of these antiseptics can actually help disinfect water, because that's one of the reasons why you're going to have major issues especially in the early going, when is you're going to have bad water. And if you can't make sure that your water is disinfected, you can't provide clean, drinkable water as a medic to your people, and you can't allow them, and they can't prepare food properly, because they don't have clean water to prepare the food properly with, well, then you're going to have trouble. You're going to have people get sick, and things like dysentery, with things like giardia, with things like, just about anything. And remember that during the Civil War, more soldiers died of things like that than died from bullets or shrapnel.
That's absolutely
right, which is why I've been, harping to the medically trained in the preparedness industry. Look, it's great to be able to plug holes. I love it. I love doing it. It's great. I get an adrenaline rush from it. It's awesome. But you need to be broader. Okay. You need to understand that there are other things that are more likely to kill a member of your group than a bullet wound or a kinetic injury or a blast injury. Right. That was my thought, but it's not cool. It's not cool to train that stuff, guys. It's cool to train TCCC and, get everybody painted up in blood and stuff like that. But that's the likelihood of something like that actually happening to a member of your group it's there, but it's not as a big of a deal as maybe sepsis or some type of infection. So I agree, and that's why I love your book. So back to mandatory minimums. So, I wrote a blog. Go ahead, Miss.
Oh, I was just going to finish the other two. I was just going to say gauze.
Oh, sorry.
I mean, you clean your wound, and now you have to cover your wound so it doesn't get infected. Again, we're all about prevention, but you can't just set gauze on there. You need something to hold on to it. So I would do two things. I would do an ACE wrap for extremities to hold on, because those can be reused, and we're always thinking about reusing things. And also tape, because if you've got a wound somewhere where you can't utilize an ACE bandage, you may need to use some tape. So ACE and tape kind of together. So antiseptics, clean your wound really well. Gauze, of course, you'd want to wash your wound with potable water as much as you can. Do use an antiseptic, put gauze on it, and then cover it up so it doesn't get any bacteria in there and get infected. So if I only had those three, that was what I would do. And I try to MacGyver other stuff if I had bleeding or
right.
like, sticks and torn up T-shirts and, you do all kinds of things with other items.
Right. And ideally, guys, in your group, now this is your bug out bag. Ideally at wherever your bug out location would be, or if you're gonna shelter in place, you should be well stocked with the other stuff. This is inside your bug out bag, 3-day bag. Get to wherever you're gonna get home, and then make it happen from there. So there are levels of preparedness. Okay, so you can look at your bug out bag and stuff like that as like a triage level until you get to definitive care, which would be your bug out location or your house.
Right. And then you need to step later.
Exactly. And the IFAC we talked about, that's stuff to stop you from dying from a traumatic injury. So that's above and beyond. Everybody should have that. That's above and beyond your normal medical supplies. So I know I kind of I don't, this is off script, guys. I apologize, but I took some heat when I was doing the IFAC mandatory minimums, because I worked at a fire department. We had a pretty good budget, but there's a whole thing about tourniquets that get these internet medics going wild. I've used 1 million. I'm not going to say that's exaggeration. I've used a few dozen of these Chinese-made tourniquets, and I understand they are a life-saving device, so that you should buy what you can afford. And if you can afford the best on the market, absolutely buy those. But boy, the internet medics roasted me when I said, if you can't afford a $40 tourniquet, go buy a $7 tourniquet. Go buy a $7 tourniquet. I've used them before in the field. They work. And people have been using stuff that weren't manufactured a lot longer than that. So anyway, what are your thoughts on those Chinese tourniquets and stuff like that?
So I've been to hundreds of preparedness expos, festivals, whatever you want to call them. And I have met numerous amounts of military guys. And most of them say, cat tourniquet, blah, blah, blah. I have had a few stories that make the hair stand up on your arm about their group, whoever was buying their supplies for their first aid kits went cheap and bought the fake stuff. And they told me about the windlass breaking. And it was not a good story. And so, I've never bought fake. I have only purchased my cat tourniquets from North American Rescue. Now, even my price is way more than what you pay like on eBay, way more. So, should they be charging that much? No, but they're a business and they want to make money, and that's what it is. But I only buy North American Rescue, and so I feel like if somebody needs to use this when the apocalypse happens, because that's what I mean, that when they use the tourniquet that they've bought from me, that it's not going to break. And
absolutely.
I thought, is it really that different? And so I have somebody who's given me a lot of the fake tourniquets, and I've used those in classes. And I've told the folks who are using them, you guys have got the cheap ones. Someone gave them to me for free. I don't know where they got them, but they just handed them to me. But it's good practice just so you know the hand motions. And that's really what you need to do. It's like with a gun, like what you were doing just now when you were doing that training. It's all about repetitive. So you don't have to think about, I have to do this. You just do it. So using the cheap ones is great for learning the hand motions, feeling what you're doing. But I don't 100% trust them. And the ones that they say they broke were on the bigger guys, because they really
that makes
had
sense.
to twist so much that it snapped. The windlass is what broke.
Yeah.
So this snapped in their hand. And I wouldn't be saying that myself, except I was actually told by military guys that I fully trusted, because I looked in their eyes. I said, please don't lie to me.
Sure.
Because I need to give people, if people can buy a cheaper version that works for them, I want to be able to give people ability to save money and maybe buy 4 of these tourniquets for the same price as one of, North American like I buy. They're like, no, Amy, they broke. I promise you, I saw it. The guy was bleeding. It broke in our hands. We had to get another one. And they were very, very heartfelt with their stories.
Wow. So there you go, guys.
It does happen.
Yeah, if you're watching this and if you need to, hey, Russ, throw up that banner where if somebody wanted to buy some of these medical supplies from these fine folks, where could they find that up? Throw up that banner, if you would. There you go. So if you need to get some top of the line stuff that you know is going to save your life, especially for your IFACs, guys. Okay, if you can afford it, definitely go to store.doomandbloom.net for merchandise. Thanks, Russ. I appreciate that, brother. So
I'm very careful
Thanks,
about my supplies. I'm very careful about who I source things from. The hemostatic gauze that I buy, like this is Sam. This is from Sam Medical. When I buy my Quick Clot, it comes from the one distributor, the main distributor in the United States. I've had relationships with these folks for 14, 15 years. I know what I'm getting. I get everything that they're using in the military packs. I want to provide to the lay folks so that they have, just as good of quality. And we hand pack all of our kits after people order. Nothing's pre-made somewhere else by other people. They're hand packed
everything's
by
fresh,
our groups and our
packed in the USA.
and our
Well, there
employees
you
are
go.
sometimes us.
Yeah,
Sometimes
exactly.
I need your medical
when
kit.
we're busy, we go in and we pack
I've
them
made
ourselves.
lots of medical
I know the
kits.
feeling. Yeah. So there you go, guys. You're hearing that from a doctor and a very qualified nurse that if you need proper medical supplies, you know now where to get them from. So definitely show them some love when you're putting together your packs, guys. So we do have a question from a longtime follower and a friend of ours, Terry. On a limited budget, what are some pieces of medical equipment that would be beneficial to have on hand? And let's say away from your bug out bag, let's say at your home or bug out location. And also she asked what's the broad spectrum antibiotic would be best to have.
Okay, I'll let you answer that afterwards. Okay, so basic things. I want you to have some gloves, some masks. Not necessarily we're talking about viruses, but if you've got an open wound and maybe you've had some kind of respiratory infection, you want to cover your mouth. You don't want to get somebody sick. Hand sanitizers, again, cheap. Have some instruments, tweezers to pick out debris that's stuck into wounds, scissors. You want to have some hemostat clamps. It would be great to have a stethoscope, a flashlight, a headlamp, a reflex hammer, basic heat and ice. You can have those ice packs, breakable heats, ace bandages. Sam splints are fancy. You can, MacGyver those, but they're reusable. So although it's an investment, Sam splints are washable and reusable. They might not look pretty after you've folded them a few times, but you can fold them a few times. So maybe you use it for an arm once, use it for an elbow once, and then maybe you use it as a cervical collar once, and then maybe you then use it for an ankle situation. So, it's an investment, but they're reusable and they're washable. They don't have to be sterile. One of your bigger investments is going to be the hemostatic gauze. This is one of the cheaper ones. Sam, who is the name of the guy who invented all this stuff, so he always names everything Sam Splint, Sam Medical. This is one of the cheaper hemostatic gauzes, and actually I love this the best. I don't know if you guys can see this, but it's a really thick, soft material, and when you pack this in a wound, this is pure chitosan. This is not granules that fall off.
Yes.
Like Celox, when you touch it, the granules fall. This is almost like a diaper material. And this, imagine packed into a wound, it really fills up and has contact with all the areas, and especially the main bleeding vessel. So I have to say this I absolutely love. I know a lot of military guys trained, all they know is quick clot. But if they would give chitosan, a little bit of love, they might actually find a new love of their life. So hemostatic gauze, get a couple of those, some tourniquets. I recommend not just having one. If you can't afford to do more than one of these, do a SWAT tourniquet. If you need to put on a second tourniquet, you can do that above. If you have 2 wounds, this is great for very big people, obese people. This is for military size. This is also great for tiny people. It can stop something that's this small, that these military size tourniquets are not going to work. So you have an infant, a toddler,
dog,
your dog.
A dog, absolutely. Yep.
They use these on horses and animals. So
now this has gotten, I got to tell you that this has gotten a bad rap by people who feel that they can't stop the pulse distal to the actual injury with this, because that happens because of one simple thing. You're not stretching this enough as you go around the extremity. You have to go so tight with this that it hurts like a son of a gun. Okay? If it's not hurting like a son of a gun, you're doing it wrong. This also has the ability to act as a sling. Also has an ability to take that ace
bandage,
take that wrap that you did there. I'm sorry, Sam splint that you had there.
Hold this in place
and stabilize it in
right.
place. So very versatile and cheap.
Right.
Yes. Perfect. Excellent.
Ace bandage. I've even heard somebody towed their car with it, but
What?
that's for another day.
So what about broad spectrum antibiotics, Doc?
All right, well, let's talk a little bit about that. I mean, it depends a little bit on what bacterial infections are common in your area, but you can't go wrong with a variety. So here's my recommendations. Number one, for those people who aren't allergic to penicillin, I think either amoxicillin or cephalexin, that would be amoxil or Keflex. They're both members of the beta-lactam family. They would be good drugs to have around, especially for soft tissue and bacterial upper respiratory infections. Dosing is relatively simple. In most cases, it's safe for pregnant and pediatric patients.
Yep.
Secondly, I would have doxycycline. Doxycycline handles a lot of different infections of the respiratory and intestinal tracts, and it's okay to take if you're allergic to penicillin drugs, although it isn't considered acceptable for use during pregnancy. Now, for those people who have claimed to me that doxycycline becomes toxic when expired, I want them to note that the Department of Defense's Shelf Life Extension Program has in the past authorized its use when there was a shortage well beyond, as a matter of fact, 5 years beyond the expiration date. So this is an okay to use drug even if it's expired. Metronidazole, which is Flagyl, is a drug which I consider very useful, especially for intestinal infections like Giardia, bacteria, certain parasites like Giardia. These are seen in intestinal and pelvic infections, among others. It's also used with other antibiotics in those people who have stubborn infections. So you would combine that with maybe with doxycycline. You might combine it with a sulfa drug or clindamycin. Speaking of sulfa drugs, that's an excellent choice for a lot of infections, especially urinary ones.
Yep.
Then there's a zithromycin or Z-Pak.
Right.
That's generally safe in pregnancy, as well as those with penicillin allergies. And it can deal with a lot of respiratory infections. It can deal with dysentery, tonsillitis, sinusitis, a lot more. And it's the additional benefit. It comes in this very, very popular Z-Pak form that is very quick and very easy
like
to
a
use.
blister pack. So easy to follow.
And one last one would be clindamycin. Brand name is Cleocin. That would be on my list. It's used to treat everything from acne to anthrax, honestly, but it's helpful for pneumonias, pelvic infections, uterine infections. It's effective against MRSA, soft tissue infections like cellulitis. Unlike doxycycline and metronidazole, it's acceptable for use during pregnancy and in people who are allergic to penicillin. Now, of course, you could be allergic to clindamycin or any other antibiotic itself.
Right.
You can be allergic to anything, but in rare cases, there is an issue with clindamycin that can induce an intestinal infection. Now, a lot of people might wonder why I didn't include Cipro in this list. The Cipro is a strong antibiotic. It's a drug of choice for a lot of things, but it can cause nerve and muscle damage. And so because of that, and because that can be pretty serious, I don't have that in my top 5 or 6.
Gotcha.
And,
okay.
Same thing with tetracycline. I'm not worried so much about using it when expired as I am with regards to the fact that it's a very, very early antibiotic, one of the first antibiotics that was on the market, and there's just too much resistance to it.
Gotcha. Perfect. So let me back up a little bit and I hope I'm not keeping you guys, but you guys are a wealth of knowledge and I love talking about this stuff. So anytime you gotta go, just act like your camera died and we'll go on with the show. but I am going to, anybody that knows me knows when I get professionals, I get the chance to talk to professionals, I pick their brains. So like I said, just fake a camera outage whenever you're ready. But speaking about mandatory minimums, I wrote a blog a while back on must-have nonfiction books. And when I was doing my due diligence, I was kind of looking through those things. And actually, the number 2 book on my list was, and before I even met you guys or heard about you guys, and of course, because you never actually read who writes the book, you just say, oh, it's a good book, was the Survival Medicine Handbook. So guys, if you want that, It's my pleasure. So if you're having problems finding it anywhere, go to my blog, PeteRobertucci.com. Go to must-have nonfiction books. And although it's the older version, when you click on the link, it will send you to the newer version.
Good.
I promise. Give me one other must-have book, medical-wise, that you guys recommend.
I just want to say one thing. The store.doomandbloom.net is where you can find the color version. The color version is not on Amazon. The color
Gotcha,
version
there you go.
is only on store.doomandbloom.net. I have the color and I have the spiral. So
Perfect.
if you want a book in spiral that'll stay open for you, that's it. One book. Oh my gosh, you're killing me.
Yeah, I know. I narrowed it down. I'm sorry.
Okay, I'm gonna hold this up real quick. They can freeze frame that.
Perfect.
those would have been okay, but if you want one,
give me one. Give me your top book must have.
This is a guy who passed away, but this is almost a little bit bigger than our book.
He was the father of wilderness medicine.
Yeah,
wilderness medicine is different than survival medicine because you do have the possibility of eventually stabilizing and transporting that person out, even though it may be miles away or even hundreds of miles away to the nearest modern medical facility. So it is different than what we write about. Because what we write about, you are it until the end. If somebody fractures their femur, you are going to be the person taking care of that person until that person is back to being fully productive. And so that we aim to make you as effective in that role as possible in our book. This one here will get you to the hospital.
Definitive care.
Eventually. And this has
it starts off in the wilderness.
Crazy pictures. I mean, wild pictures.
Yeah, actually looks like my paramedic book, For the Love of God. That thing was huge.
Yeah.
So great. That's good. There you go.
Not as portable.
You may not be bitten by a black mamba in the next week or so,
but if
you're right, exactly.
If you want to have two great books, there you go.
Deep dive. You want to take a deep dive? There you go.
Absolutely. So it's funny that you say, look, you guys, in a lot of aspects, you're going to be your own first responder. And I was training with the IDF guys down in South Florida, and we were going through something that was I felt was a little too rough for me. And they go, Pete, of course, in their accent, be strong. You're on your own. And that was it. That was the only advice they gave me. So that's the same way when you're coming across some of these medical emergencies, especially in a grid down situation. We're giving you a wealth of knowledge here. So please utilize it, guys. It's important stuff. I was watching our good friend, like I had said earlier, Angry American. You guys are on his. You guys have been doing podcasts. It's a busy week for you guys. So thanks for being here on a Friday night. I know you guys must be exhausted, but you had mentioned something that bears repeating, and somebody's already asking about it inside the Kick chat. Let's talk about expiration dates.
Real quick, Pete.
Go ahead, Bub.
Go ahead, Russ.
Amy, could you put up the cover of that book one more time, please, before we get much further? Someone was looking for it, and I didn't get a chance to screenshot it.
I'm not sure you can get it on
Let's do this real quick.
Amazon. I think you have to go to Wilderness Medicine to buy this.
We belong to the Wilderness Medical Society.
There's a website right there.
Oh, okay, there you go.
There's a website right there.
Expertconsult.com. We'll put that up for you guys.
Yep. This is super expensive. This is not a cheap book. This is a big investment.
Perfect. Russ, you have complete control of the scenes again. Sorry, buddy. Thank you very much. We appreciate that. And you can put whatever scene you want up, Mr. Russ. So expiration dates, go.
Oh, okay. Well, years ago, I wrote an article about the truth relating to expiration dates on medicines. That also ended up on Survival Blog before we had our own website. And, and we've seen some confusing information on the internet that tells you how dangerous it is to use expired drugs. So I think it's time to set the record straight with regards to this kind of stuff. Before I start, I want to remind your audience that our focus is medical preparedness for major disasters and long-term survival. That means a strategy of putting together stockpiles of supplies that might save a life in times of trouble. In normal times, when you can get a fresh prescription from your doctor, I mean, do so. Now, this is what you need to know. What are expiration dates? What do they signify? Expiration dates were first mandated in 1979. Drugs didn't have them before then. And what do they mean? They mean that they are the last day that a drug company will guarantee 100% potency of a medicine. Now, that they do not, and people need to know that, except in the very, very rare occasions, they do not become toxic after the expiration date. I promise you, you're not going to grow a horn in the middle of your forehead if you take a pill the week after it expires. Now, in many cases, drugs that are in pill, powder, or capsule form will be 100% potent for years after their expiration dates. And now, how can I, an old country doctor, say something like that? Well, FEMA, the Federal Emergency Management Agency, and the Department of Defense stockpiles all these millions of doses of drugs used in emergency settings in a national stockpile. And in the past, when those drugs expired, they got the forklifts out and millions of dollars worth of drugs were discarded. And that got to be pretty expensive, as you can imagine, even for the government. So a study was performed called the Shelf Life Extension Program, SLEP. And they found that most medications, as long as they are in pill or capsule form, were still effective after their expiration dates, often for years. Now, so as such, I recommended not throwing away, but instead making them part of your survival medical storage. And this, by the way, was not the case for medicines that were in liquid form. When they were tested, they actually lost potency pretty quickly. Things like insulin, things like amoxicillin elixir that they give to kids. Those things actually do lose their potency pretty fast. So it is the pills, the medicines that are in pill or capsule form that are the ones that are going to be the most potent in an expired state. So these findings led the government to put out extensions of expiration dates for certain drugs as needed. They did a 5-year extension given to the anti-flu drug Tamiflu during the 2009 swine flu epidemic, for example. The one for the antibiotic doxycycline was because of a major military buy of doxycycline that essentially wiped out the entire market. And so they gave you 5 years additional years to use doxycycline after its expiration date. But despite all this, you're going to see quotes, usually from academic types, that all medications are dangerous when expired and should be tossed. And well, that's fine. But if you're a member of the preparedness community, you're going to one day have to make a decision in a true disaster setting about whether or not to use an expired medication. So let's say you have a loved one fading from an infection, something bad's happened, you're off the grid, you got little or no hope of getting to modern medical care, you got an expired bottle of antibiotics, what are you going to do? Someone you love is dying. Are you going to use the expired drug or not?
Exactly. 100%. Obviously, that's a no-brainer. 100%. Good.
Right.
So hopefully, Jeff, that explained that for you over there in chat.
I do want to say one thing. Medicine should be stored in cool, dry, dark conditions. Their potency fades twice as fast if they're stored at 90 degrees than if they're stored at 50 degrees. Freezing them, however, is rarely helpful. So this is something that you just need to know. You have to look at the drug and see if it's changed color, see if it smells unusual. For example, aspirin that goes bad smells sort of like ammonia. Or consistency, anything you see, let's say in a liquid medicine, if you see solid particles on the bottom, that might mean that it's time to not consider using those.
Right, or if it's supposed to be clear and now it's cloudy, that's something that would be an indication that maybe it's a. Miss Teresa asked, we talked about antibiotics. What about pain meds and BP meds and anti-rejection meds and stuff like that? Expiration dates still apply? Your thought process on that?
Well, I don't think that there's ever been any studies on anti-rejection drugs with regards to how long they last after their expiration date. So there are some things that I just can't tell you, but I can tell you that pain meds and BP meds, pretty much, if they are in pill or capsule form, they'll last probably a good time after their expiration date. I don't have a specific time, but if you go to the Journal of Pharmaceutical Sciences 2006 July, they have the list of the 122 medicines that the Department of the Defense actually tested, and there may be the medicine that you're thinking about there, but anti-rejection drugs, I don't think anybody knows.
Perfect. Thank you very much. I don't know how you guys do it. There's a certain stigma with being associated to the prepping community. Doomsday preppers, that gave us a bad name. Have you, as medical professionals, have you gotten any blowback from your colleagues or any other in the medical community for your books or even your overall thoughts on preparedness medicine? Have you gotten any blowback, any bad results from some of your colleagues?
Well, let's put it this way. Wait, before I just want to say, less often than I'd expect, more often than I'd like. It's easy for me. I just want to say why we're able to do this and other doctors are reluctant to do this. Okay. I'm retired. I'm 70 years old. Basically, I am old enough to say what I really believe. Mm-hmm. And I can say it much easier than young doctors starting out. They have licenses to worry about. They have young children they have to raise. They have to send them to college. I'm actively licensed too, but if the government wants to take my license, go right ahead. People are still going to call me. They're still going to call me doc, and they're going to still listen to my advice for the rest of my life. So
absolutely,
my philosophy is that I'll always give a patient or a stranger the same medical advice I would give a member of my family. It's not part of the oath you take as a doctor, but I promised I do that when I started out, and I've never strayed from it. I think Amy can say the same.
Yes. I was just going to say that one example that were at a Self-Reliance Expo, and early on we had put together an IV kit, and it had a 500 liter or a 500 cc bag of normal saline. And it had an IV start kit, and it had the tubing, and it had the cath. I think I did a 18 gauge cath or a 20 gauge cath. Typical IV start kit. Mm-hmm. And somebody came over who was also selling medical supplies. And they're like, "Oh, you can't sell that. That's illegal. And that needs a prescription." And they gave us a rash of CRAP. Mm-hmm. And I was like, you know what? It's not worth it. I'm just trying to help the prepper. I'm like, nobody here is going to go home and start an IV on themselves. This is like somebody's dying, the hospital's closed, and somebody needs an IV. They made a big stink, and it was embarrassing. And I was like, you know what?
But wait a minute.
I'm not going to sell IVs anymore. It was really sad. And
I want to say this, though. I want to say this, that for every one of those, we get probably 10 medical professionals that come up and actually thank us. And we actually get help from medical professionals. I can show you this bag. Now, this bag here, I handed this to a couple of dentists that we knew that were like-minded with us. And I said to them, "You're off the grid for the next 10 years. You're the dentist. Fill it up."
Oh, good idea.
They put together a dental kit for me, and they actually agreed on just about everything that was in it. And so we have a dental kit that's like one of a kind on our website. And it's something that people need to know. Now, not if there's a few days without power due to a storm, but if the real thing happens 6 months down the road, you're probably going to be seeing as many people for dental issues as you are for medical issues.
Well,
absolutely.
I do a lot of research when it comes to putting together kits, and I find the bag, and I think about the scenarios that I want, and I put as much into it as I can to take care of as many different issues as possible, so that you have, not just boo-boo stuff, but you also have something for orthopedic and for burns and maybe for rehydration, putting some of the rehydration packets in it. So I try to think of as much as I can get into a kit, no matter how small it is. And the bigger I get, I increase the diagnoses and the issues, and that I increase the volume of what I'm putting in. So everything kind of
So much
exponentially gets bigger.
So much so that you can take a couple of empty bags and you can take one of her big kits and you can make 3 or 4 kits.
Oh yeah, easily.
There you go. So it's a value, guys, for your medical supplies. It's a no-brainer, and you get the expertise behind it. So these guys are very active on social media. If you get something from them and say, "Hey, what's this? What's this for? What's this for?" Look, I'm sure they wouldn't mind you hitting them up on social media, and they'll give you their expertise. And you're not hearing it just from, a old trench doctor. You're hearing it from an actual doctor and a very certified nurse. So it's a no-brainer. I don't understand it. It's a no-brainer. So we like to try to bring the best people we possibly can onto the podcast. And just so you know that, we don't just bring every Tom, Dick, and Harry, I guess, on the podcast. We want to bring the best of the best. So that's why we don't have guests every week. We find these experts and bring them to you, and here you go. So we certainly appreciate that. Russ, let's open. You guys got just a few more minutes to answer some viewer questions, or
sure.
Okay, great. Russ, you're up, brother. Do what you do. Let's hear some questions from the viewers over on Kick. Nope, here we go. Got something happening
here.
We'll try to pin.
There we go. Yeah. Okay. So first is a comment from our friend Jeff Johnson up in in the communist state of New York. He was actually able to order 100 tablets of fish box between, I'm assuming, Wednesday and tonight, and he'll let us know once it arrives.
From who?
Look at the.
Wait, I want to know from who.
Might be expired, but
I don't care about expired. I want to know where he got it. Does he say where?
There you go, Jeff. Get back with us.
He's typing it now. He's typing it in now, and while
we're
he's
probably
typing,
on a little delay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, he's typing it in the Kick chat. Fireman Ed says, and he's asked this question the other night, and it wasn't able to get answered at the time. What about the cattle, swine type meds you can get at Tractor Supply and family farm stores?
In the past, we haven't included those in the medicines that we recommend, simply because the medicines we recommend only came in human dosages. Right. When you're talking about large animal meds, that means that you have to, at the very least, be
recalculate. You have to recalculate. You have to
be accomplished in recalculating the dosage and see how much is appropriate for humans.
And also, occasionally there's an additive that they put in animal medicines that they don't allow in human medicines.
Right. You have to make sure that it has one ingredient.
Yeah.
And that is the active ingredient, the active antibiotic, for example, or whatever medicine you're looking for. Now, with dogs, they have Augmentin. I don't know if people have heard of the drug Augmentin. It's amoxicillin and clavulanic acid. It's very popular medicine, and it comes in dog medicine as Clavamox. But the thing is that it comes in the dose that you might give a Chihuahua, or you might give a beagle, and so you have to work the other way. Go from a smaller one to a larger one. So it just depends, I think, on how good you are in recalibrating these things, and it also depends on what additional items or ingredients they put in it. There can't be any additional ingredients.
Gotcha. So be careful of the additives that they're cramming in those things. So do your due diligence, guys, is what they're getting at. So good. What else you got, Russ? Anything else?
Wait, I just want to say something.
Yep. Hold on, Russ.
Yep.
I did hear that somebody tried to order some fish antibiotics from some company, and it may not be this company, so I don't want to. I'm not dissing anybody, but this Thomas Labs that they're showing. I don't know if you guys can you see that picture? Is that too bright? Hold on, let me turn this down a little bit.
Well,
Thomas
Labs has not produced those in years.
Oh, wow.
They've stopped making these. So the picture that they have here, all these Thomas Labs, I'm a little concerned about what he's actually going to get, if anything. So I would love to hear that feedback.
He ordered his from Fish RX Online.
That's what this is. Fish RX Online. That's what I have here. I do see.
There you go.
So Jeff, be careful.
But they do have some that I know were more recent. So they have the aquarium, doxycycline. There was another one that's called, what's the other one? It disappeared here. Aqua Mox, and Aqua.
Now the problem is
I actually own all those antibiotics too.
They have these medicines, but they're not producing.
They're just not making them anymore.
They're not making them anymore. So if you can get them,
maybe
go ahead and get them.
Listen, maybe these people had thousands of antibiotics in their warehouse and they're just now selling them out. I just know that those people who are bottling those aren't bottling them anymore. So
Perfect.
If you can get them, great. Go for it.
We have
Russ, give us one more.
Yeah, we have one last question. It's actually two at the same time. They kind of go hand in hand. Opie from down in Louisiana, another firefighter. He says, what's the most shelf-stable antiseptic? And Jeff as well as asked, which antiseptic do you recommend?
I like BZK because it doesn't burn as much and it can also help prevent rabies
in terms of
certain animal bites.
In terms of shelf stability, it probably isopropyl alcohol. I would guess.
Oh.
And then there's povidone iodine, but I think that if I had to think about it, if it's like between hydrogen peroxide, that definitely does not last long.
No.
Povidone iodine probably
probably lasts the longest, don't you think?
No, I think
because I'm thinking alcohol is gonna evaporate more.
Well, I mean, you have to have it stored in such a fashion.
It's got to be right.
Yeah, it has to be sealed properly. But
very good.
I would guess that that's it. But those
I've
things
had iodine. I have a bottle of iodine that has to be 20 years old. Easily.
And
it seems to be fine.
I think chlorhexidone is also good.
Oh yeah, I like that.
I
love that.
I would think that the isopropyl alcohol would be a little too stringent for an open wound.
Yeah, you don't really want to use that as an antiseptic.
Yeah,
Unfortunately, it kills baby growing cells. It's not something you really want to put into wounds frequently. Maybe the first time if you have to.
Right.
Yeah, that's not something you want to keep. It's going to delay healing. It's not going to help your healing situation.
Gotcha. So, guys, we certainly appreciate having you here. I know we took up more time than you anticipated. For those of you that are hanging out on Kick and on the other platforms, we're going to take a quick intermission, and then we're going to move to Kick, where we're going to go to the after-hour show, and I can finally drink some of my bourbon here. By the way, Nurse Amy, I'm not sure 100%, but the coffee I've been drinking came from Mountain Readiness, and our good friend Bill McNutt from McNutter Butter Coffee says that this is the Nurse Amy blend.
Yes,
salute.
All right. That was from last year. He said he had 2 blends. I said, well, how can I pick? I want half and half. So then he did the half and half blend, and you called it Nurse Amy. That's so funny.
Did. So, guys, listen, Opie, don't go anywhere. We still got an after show to go to where we'll cut loose a little bit. But Doc Bones, Nurse Amy, we're going to leave you with the closing words on the traditional platforms, and then we'll let you go for the evening. What do you got for us?
All right. Basically, for all you medics out there, I want you to remember the words of Teddy Roosevelt, and that is, do what you can with what you have where you are.
Outstanding. Yep. Excellent, guys. We appreciate having you. I'll touch bases with you in a day or two. We thank you for everything. And guys, if you missed anything on the podcast, these are going to replay. You can click on them again. So I know we moved kind of quick, but there's a lot of information there to absorb. So go back, look at the replay, and make sure you share it, guys. So Doc Bones, Nurse Amy, thank you for being with us. We're going to hit the intermission, Russ, and God bless, guys. I appreciate you being here.
God bless. Thank you, everybody. Pete. Be safe.